appropriate as we are in this transition season between summer and the school year. We have folks who are moving to other places, so having this reminder of what Sabbath is appropriate. I'll give you a very oversimplified recap of last week. We heard the passage from Deuteronomy where the 10 Commandments are listed out. We heard about that fourth commandment that calls us to honor the Sabbath, to keep it holy. But we also looked at the passage from Matthew that talks about Jesus inviting those with heavy burdens, those who are weary, to come to him for rest. And we're reminded that Sabbath is not supposed to be a burden. It's not supposed to be this thing that we have to be super strict about and get fussy over how we do Sabbath, the time that we spend in it. It really is a gift that Jesus offers to us. So we're going to hear more about that this morning as we take a look at Genesis chapter 2. We're going to hear part of the creation story, and then we'll jump over to the Gospel of John and hear a little bit more about Jesus' thoughts on Sabbath. So let us listen for the Word of God in Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all their multitude. And on the seventh day God finished the work that God had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. And then skipping over to John chapter 15, starting at verse 9. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. A God who rests. What a notion. What other God out there takes time to have a break? A God who rests. Was there nothing else on God's to-do list that seventh day? Nothing more important? A God who rests. Rather radical, don't you think? The creator of the universe pausing to just take it all in. After a time of creation and weaving together the universe, God indeed took a break. I wonder if God thought about all of those things that could have happened on that seventh day, all of those things on that ever-infinite list, those landforms that never got built, the animals that never got created. But instead, God pushes that list aside and delights in what has been done. God rests, carving out that seventh day as sacred and set apart. And for a time, it stayed that way. The seventh day stayed sacred and holy during the time when humanity and God were in harmony, delighting in each other's company in the Garden of Eden. But turn the page and we see sin enter in. We see that story of the apple and the snake, and we turn the page to the next chapter, and we see brother killing brother, and it all goes downhill from there. That harmony is thrown out the window, and we are thrown out of the garden. We forget about how God intended things to be. We get caught in this cycle of forgetting, too distracted by all of the things that occupy our time, the work that seems to have no end. We find ourselves driven by the appeals of this world. More money, more power, more recognition, more love, more possessions, more security. As Wayne Muller, student of Renewal, puts it, a successful life has become a violent enterprise. We are at war on our spirits because we're too preoccupied to listen to the quiet voices that seek to nourish and renew us. We're at war on our communities because we're fearfully protecting what we have because we don't feel safe enough to be kind and generous. We're at war on earth because we can't take the time to place our feet on the ground and allow it to feed us and taste its blessings and goodness. All of this warfare, our refusal to pause and rest, leaves us burnt out and exhausted. Without allowing ourselves to rest, we start operating out of survival mode. Everything suddenly seems so urgent. We inflate our own self-importance. We assume that the world, or even just our house, will fall apart if we take a break. My peers and I fell into this cycle when we were young adult volunteers on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. There were 6 of us that lived in trailers in these camps where volunteers would come week after week to rebuild after Hurricane Katrina. There was a lot of work to do, and thankfully, a lot of volunteers. Well, one week at a staff meeting, one of my friends noted that she was having a hard time just taking a break. It seems the work was endless in these camps. And the trouble was, we lived in these trailers situated in the middle of these camps. So as soon as you open your door, you're on. You're working. Either helping volunteers with hospitality needs or getting crews set up at the houses for work. From waking until sleeping, it was possible to never stop working. She said she was starting to struggle, and I realized I was starting to struggle too. I didn't realize how exhausted I was until she named that for herself. Even meals, I realized, were exhausting. For this introvert who needs a little bit of space at times, it was hard to have conversations nonstop with people in the camp. It finally occurred to me that I was exhausted, but it also occurred to me that I could ask for help. My director was more than happy to send in a co-manager who would share the work and help me have a break. We could give each other a day off every week. I realized I did not need to work 24/7. The camp would indeed carry on without me for a day. My inflated sense of self-importance was put in check. I realized I wasn't the most important person in this work, and I was able to find rest and Sabbath. Sometimes when we are in the thick of it, we don't even know how exhausted we are. We get caught in those motions of life, busying ourselves with more and more, not allowing ourselves to rest and reflect, not allowing ourselves to just be present to appreciate what is around us. And I think this part is rather heartbreaking to God. It doesn't take much to imagine God longing for those days when we did rest in Sabbath, when we enjoyed God's creation and God's presence. John 15 points to this longing. The passage that we read this morning comes right after that passage about the vine and the branches. That metaphor Jesus uses to say that he is that vine, we're the branches, and we need each other. We're called to abide in one another if we want to bear fruit, if we want to live well. And so right after that passage, here we see Jesus reminding the disciples about all of this, reminding them that he yearns for their time, their relationship with him. He invites them to remember how much he loves them and how he hopes for their devotion in return, going so far as to call them friends. This is the only time in the Gospel of John where Jesus calls the disciples friends. He reminds them of that commandment to love one another, which is very much intertwined with loving God. And although Jesus doesn't outright name Sabbath in this conversation, it is very much woven in. He invites these disciples into a time of devotion to one another in fellowship, that intentional time spent with each other, to fellowship and just enjoy being. He encourages them to make this a priority because after all, how can you nurture relationships if you don't take a break from all the work, if you don't ever stop? I'm reminded of the 80s classic movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. If you've seen it, you know that Ferris Bueller is a senior in high school, and he's getting pretty tired toward the end of the school year. And so he decides to ditch school for a day. He invites his girlfriend Sloane, he invites his best friend Cameron to join him on a little adventure. So they leave their Chicago suburb and head for downtown, where they have an epic day of fun. They visit an art museum, they go to a baseball game, they enjoy a fancy lunch, and they even find themselves participating in a parade. All of this gets his best friend super anxious, which is half the fun of the movie, watching him freak out from time to time. But at the end of the day, each of the teens have this existential revelation. They realize something about themselves and about their relationships to each other. They're drawn closer together, even though they know graduation is going to push them further apart in a month or two. But all of this wouldn't have happened if they'd just gone to school and had an ordinary day, doing homework and studying. They needed to take a break. They needed to rest and just be present with each other and spend time together. Now, students, I'm not encouraging you to ditch school, but I think we could learn a little something from Ferris and his friends. I think that they teach us this value of taking a break, of pausing from that daily routine and doing something that's really out of the ordinary, which is just being present with each other. I'm struck by the last line of the movie when Ferris says, "Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop to look around every once in a while, you could miss it." Jesus echoes this sentiment when he calls us to abide in him, when he beckons us to nurture our friendship with him. But like Ferris Bueller, we have to stop first. We have to carve out space in our week and allow for Sabbath, that time of just being present with God. Now, as I mentioned last week, although Sabbath is a commandment, it is not supposed to be a It's not supposed to cause us more anxiety at the thought of taking this whole day off to do nothing. Because Sabbath, to be honest, can look a whole lot of different ways. It might not mean taking a full day off every week. We all know how hard it is to afford living here in Austin, with folks who are taking on extra jobs to make ends meet. A full day off is a privilege. And there are those who are taking care of children or aging family members, and you know that a full day off is just not in the cards. But what if we set aside a few hours every week? Maybe it's a morning, maybe it's an evening after work. A little bit of time makes a world of difference. And in that time, we set our phones down, we ignore social media, we turn off those TVs, and I know this might sound heretical here in Texas, but watching football does not count as Sabbath. You gotta take a break even from that. Sabbath is a time to just stop. To stop working, to stop making money, to stop spending money. It is a time to look around and remember who you are. A chance to listen to your life and be present. This could mean an afternoon at the park by yourself or with family. This could mean a slow, lazy morning on the porch with a cup of coffee. This might mean, in my case, taking a holy nap on the occasional Sunday afternoon. It doesn't mean doing anything extraordinary or hard, but it definitely means doing nothing of any consequence or importance. It's just about finding rest and renewal. As Kara Root puts it, you don't start Sabbath after all of the work is done. The house is clean, the thank you notes are written, the gutters are cleared. Sabbath starts when you stop. The work is put down, and the only thing left is human beings being human in the presence of God, who was there all along, but who goes unnoticed the rest of the week. Our texts in this sermon series all touch on this underlying truth, that the Sabbath is God's strategy for helping us to remember that God is God and we are not, and that we are human beings made in God's image for love and connection. When God gives us that command to honor the Sabbath, to keep that day holy, we are given a gift, an invitation to slow down, a chance to remember who we are and whose we are. Life does indeed move pretty fast. If we don't stop for Sabbath, we are definitely going to miss something. Amen.